Hey, welcome back. This is the third and hopefully final part of this CSS basic page creation tutorial. Righto, we got up to this bit, okay, which is making our header, our navbar, and we're now contemplating how to make, okay, I'm just back in the Illustrator mockup here for a minute, this content section, and I was describing that it will be useful to have one big div, okay, that's containing two nested divs. So basically they are going to be controlled by the outside frame, much like the container's doing for the whole page. So let's go and get on with doing that. And back in Dreamweaver, we shall do just that. Same process, once again, just insert a div. And this one we're going to call, I don't know, main content. Okay, I'm using underscores and things too, by the way, in my file names for these things. Never a good idea to leave spaces or anything in web-based file names, so it's just a habit. It's worth doing. Okay, now once again, I'm just being very careful where I place this, and I want to tell this to appear after the tag that I called navbar. Okay, so that's the last thing that was in the order in what I was doing. So I want my main content box to appear after that. Voila, it worked. And so now, of course, I need to make the corresponding rule for that div that I just made. Now, incidentally, you might notice here that each time I do this, if I've actually clicked immediately before in the div that I just made, when I create the rule, it knows that that's the thing I'm talking about. But because my page is getting complex, it finds that there's two divs there. Okay, so you might have noticed that if you're trying to do this yourself. So I can choose less specific there instead of just writing that in from scratch. Do note though that you do still have to go up here and change that to an ID. Okay, so it knows and defines this as the correct thing. Okay, so ID, the thing we just made was a thing called main content, hashtag in front, means it's going to be a rule that applies to that. Okay, so let's do that. And I'm just using the same technique I was using before. I'm going to set this to be 800 wide. I'm not going to put a height on it because the height will be determined by the content that I put inside it. And I'm going to use the same trick of auto margins left and right to center that. And there it is. Okay, so that's worked pretty well. That little bit of placeholder text is still there, but I'm going to keep moving on now to create those two subdivisions. Okay, which is back in Illustrator here, just so you can see the 5 and 6 area, okay, which is my sub-navigator and my content. So I'm treating those two columns. All right, so back to Dreamweaver. And I'll carry on now and insert those divs. Okay, so insert div tag. I'm going to call this one left content. I suppose I could call it sub-nav or something, whatever makes sense. But left content makes sense to me, and in this case I'm carefully choosing that to be after the start of the tag main content, because that means it's going to put it inside that div that we just made, which is exactly where I want it. Okay, and the other thing that I know is that if I check back on my Illustrator file there and I measured those sample boxes I made, I know that that space there is approximately, or in fact it's exactly 140 pixels wide. So that's how big I want that left content div to be. So I shall make a rule for that. Okay, left content, it's an ID. And I shall set the box size of that to be a width of 140. Apply. And there it is. Now I could start to put my content in for that, which is just typing sub-nav and blah, blah, blah. In fact, I might as well do that. A real quick way, of course, would just be go and copy that from back in Illustrator here, seeing as I've already typed it. Just find the layer that I did that on. There we go. Okay, so to save me from typing, I'm just copying and pasting. Note that when I do this, it is simply just pasting that in there as HTML text, which is good. That's what we want. I'm going to worry about styling that to the right font in a minute. Okay, so there's that bit, and so I'll carry on now. I'll make that second div. Okay, so this is the, whoops, not Photoshop, the number 6 div area. Okay, this bit, which is where our text is going to go, our main text. All right, back to Dreamweaver. insert div tag. I'm going to call this text content. And this time I want it to appear after the tag left content. Okay, so I want it to appear basically next in line after. You'll notice that one of the options isn't to say appear to the right of. Okay, we're going to take care of that in a minute. So it's just after the tag left content, because I don't want it to appear inside the left content, I want it to be next to it. Okay, and there it is. Okay, now the box I'm sitting in is the main content container is 800 wide. That little one, the left content we made, was just 140. So it means I need to make a rule for this one, which is text content. It's an ID. That is going to be 660, I think. I think that's right, if my maths is serving me well. And there we go. I'm not going to declare heights on that because the text will take care of that in a minute. And there it is, and it didn't quite work. And the question could be, well, why is it doing that? Well, the reason why it's doing that is because, as you may be discovering, everything always by default wants to go to that left-hand side. And it's doing that, but in this case, it's returning down underneath that last div that we made. And we need to find a way of telling it to appear right next to it. Now, fortunately, there is a relatively easy way to do that. And if I go and modify the rules that we just made, okay, I'll show you the thing that you use to do that. Okay, first of all, on that left content one, once again, it's in the box tab, and it's this thing here, the mysterious thing called float. Okay, and as soon as I did that, you'll see that that actually did fix part of that content. I'm going to apply the same thing to the text content as well. And what that's done, it's put, there's my left navigator, there's, whoops, just see if I can find it. There's my right column, okay? And it's now putting that neatly against that. Now, it does also look like it's done some pretty spaz things because we're getting all sorts of weird text appearing here. That's all just the placeholder stuff, okay? So it's showing me the placeholder text for the original main content box, which is meant to be holding all that. It gives the illusion that it's actually only going halfway through. Notice it seems to be cutting through that left-hand navigator there. That's just the way it displays the divs in this sort of preview mode. Okay, if you check your code, you'll find out that if you've done this in the right order, they are actually sitting in the right order. Okay, now we're going to take care of the weird ways that they're appearing in just a sec. Okay, one thing I'm going to do now is just get rid of some of that placeholder content. Okay, so I'll get rid of that. The bit that's appearing at the side there is just a placeholder from the original container. I'll leave that there just for a second, and I'll just be lazy once again and just go and grab all this text from Illustrator, where I mocked it up, copy it, and I'll just paste it straight in as text into Dreamweaver. Okay, and there it is. And that's working okay. That's pretty much what I wanted. But we are getting some annoying things going on there. Basically, it doesn't look too pretty. And the text, as we've placed in those new divs, is going right to the very edge. Okay. Now, really in this layout, frankly, that's not going to make a huge difference because we've actually got plenty of buffer space. But in many layouts, that would be an issue. And what you really want is a little bit of buffer space. So what we'll do now is we'll have a look at what the padding and margins do. So let's do that first of all on the sub navigator. Okay. The other thing I want to do too here is fix the font. Okay. I don't want the font appearing in that default Times Roman thing. I want it to appear in more of a Helvetica-y sans serif thing. So I'll take care of that first. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to change the rule, okay, for my main content box, which was the one that was holding both these elements. Okay, and the reason for doing that is because by changing it there, it will apply that rule to both the divs that are nested inside that. Okay, so to change that, it's just a matter of going into the Type tab for that main content rule, and I'm just going to set it to be Arial Helvetica. I'm also just going to make another change just to show you what it does, which is to change the size. I can just set it to a smaller font size. Okay, there we go. So that's taken care of that. The reason why that's worked is because these nested divs, the ones sitting inside the main container one, are inheriting the rules. That's the concept of cascading style sheets. The rules cascade down through to the different rules underneath. So by setting the rule for the bigger container, the ones inside it will inherit that. Okay, in a case like this though, if we look at our mock-up, I now want the text in the left-hand side to be purple, and I want this one to remain black. Okay, so this means I do, in fact, in Dreamweaver, need to go and make a minor change to the left content rule, okay, which is this one here, and to tell it that I want to use type's already been set, so in this case I just changed the colour, okay, which is that purple. So I just sampled it there from the bit at the side there, so I know it's the right colour. And so what this is going to do is it's inherited the font from the div that's that is holding that one. So I don't need to declare the font, but I do need to declare the colour because I want the type in just that div to have that colour. Okay, so apply that, and that's worked. And the other thing we just want to muck around with here is adding a little bit of buffer space. And this is where I'll attempt to explain what margins and padding is doing. Okay, essentially what happens here is padding, okay, is setting space on the inside of the box, and margins set space on the outside of the box. So the box I'm referring to is one at the side here. So to give that little bit of buffer space, we can apply some padding. I only really need it to jut in from the left-hand edge, so I'll turn off same for all. I'll type in 20 pixels. But I want you to have a look at what that does when I apply that rule. Things will go a bit haywire. See how that pushed the other box down? And that might seem like a disastrous thing, and it's really ruined the layout, and oh, how's it doing that? It should be contained by the box. Well, it's really a pretty simple bit of maths, really. We originally told that div to be 140 wide, and then we've added some padding. It actually now means that that in total is 160 wide. So we add that with a 660 wide box, which was the one on the right hand side, and that's now too wide for the 800 wide box that's containing it. So it means whenever you're mucking around with padding or margins, you need to calculate that in, and sort of you might have to take it. So in this case I need to remove 20 from the width, okay, to allow for 20 extra padding. So both those two things add up to 140. If I apply that, it'll go back to the original width that it was. Okay. I want to do the same thing to the content in here as well. So I'll make that change on the text content rule, just double click it, go into the box setting, and I'll add some spacing on the left and the right this time. So I'll make it 20 on both, okay, which means that's 20, 20, which is 40. I need to remove that from the original 660 width to keep it the same overall width. Okay, so 620 plus 20 plus 20 is 660. Okay, and that's behaving itself. All right, so that stuff is pretty much working, and we've really only got a couple of little bits to go before this is finished. And the final thing really is, oh, well, I didn't actually include it on here, but I want to add a footer, and on the overlay I was just showing that as my 7th main div. Okay, footer at the bottom of the page, and I'm doing that for two reasons. One reason is because it's a very common thing to do on a page, but also I just want to show what effect that can have on some of the other divs that are on the page, and why a footer is often used to make some of the other divs behave themselves and to appear where they should go. Okay, and to show you what I mean by that, I'm just going to quickly add a new div. I'm going to call it footer. I'm going to tell it to appear after the tag main content. Okay, because the main content's holding those two things, I want it to appear after that. And off I go. And I'll make a rule for it, like we've been doing. Okay, for everything. Make the div, then make the rule. That's an ID. Footer is what we called it. And I want my footer to be 800 wide, and I'm going to make it 30 pixels high. So it's going the same width as my header, and it should work. And there we go. But once again, I get weird stuff going on. It's appearing down here. Okay. Now we need to find out why that's happening. And to do that, looks like there will be one final video to tidy this whole thing up. Okay, so come back for the fourth, and I promise final installment, where we'll finish this whole stinking page and you'll know exactly how to make one of these things yourself. Okay, be back in a sec.